I never had the 64 count crayon box, just the modest set of 8: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, brown, and black. I'd watch the other kids open their crayon castles, 4 rows of colors like silver and gold and purple mountain's majesty. And I always felt like their lives just must be more beautiful than mine. Maybe that's where it started, this belief that beauty comes not from abundance, but from attention, from limitation, even. Creativity isn't the freedom of infinite colors, it's the art of working with what you have. They say creativity means being willing to color outside the lines, and I get that. Rules can become a form of self censorship, but there's a subversive kind of power in staying between the lines and still importing beauty from the outside. Because I still believe in creativity, not just as an expression, but as resistance, as resourcefulness. And I refuse to believe that beauty requires abundance. I think of poetry, how a sonnet doesn't trap the poet, it sharpens the poem. How even a single blue crayon moving in one direction on paper can become the sea. I'm Marcus Goodyear from the H.E. Butt Foundation. This is the Echoes Podcast. Today we welcome Austin Kleon, New York Times bestselling author of Steal Like an Artist, Show Your Work, and Keep Going. And we're going to talk about creativity as an act of power and belief. I'm here with my co-host, Camille Hall Ortega. Austin, welcome.
We're so glad to have
Hello.
you.
Thank you for
Yes.
having me.
Let's dive right in. Tell us a little bit about what you do and what creativity looks like for you.
Oh my. Well, I usually tell people I'm a writer who draws. I make books with pictures and art with words. So I'm kind of a hybrid beast, where the verbal and the visual is kind of, they're interwoven for me. As far as creativity, it's a funny word. I never really thought about it that much until I had a book that said creative on the cover. I've always been really interested in art and making art, but as part of my kind of journey as a person who makes things, is that I have had to think about that word creativity a lot. And I think, for me, it's just taking what's in front of you and everybody else and turn it into something new that we haven't seen before.
Was so good. One thing that I wondered about is for folks who feel kind of creatively blocked. If you feel like you're
Yeah.
experiencing some sort of creative block or writer's block or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's a
Huh.
twofold approach, though. I think you have to the input and the output. You really have to be sure that the ratio is
Mm,
correct. Like
okay.
something that was really interesting to me as a young writer is I discovered that someone like Stephen King will write for 3 hours in the morning and then he'll read all afternoon. That was really shocking
Whoa.
to me as a young writer,
Yeah.
is that someone with that prodigious of an output would actually spend a good deal of his day on the couch reading. But if you think about it, 3 hours is about that's if you're cranking for 3 hours and you do that
Yeah.
365 days a year, you got a novel.
Yeah.
Especially if you're someone like King, who seems to be able to write with a kind of open throttle,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's very important, I think, for people to figure out what the ratio is, what their proper ratio is. For me, I really only have about 3 or 4 really creative hours in me in the studio. And
Yeah.
then the rest of the day needs to be, spent filling up. But so I think it's twofold. I think, you need to find inspiration. So, like Julia Cameron says, take yourself on an artist date. I actually think the material that most people need to use the most is time. I think time is kind of the primary
Mm,
material for creative work. I think time, space, and materials, I don't think they're in that order of hierarchy, but
Yeah.
time is really the thing that the artist, I think, has to work with. And one of the ways I think to get inspired is to put inspiration on the calendar.
oh wow.
Is I'm going to schedule this day. I'm going to go out. I'm going to buy some new art supplies. I'm going to go to the
Yeah.
museum. I'm going to watch a
Yep.
movie. I'm going to do this thing. And then you schedule another time where you're going to go into the studio and you're going to do
Yeah.
something with that stuff.
Yeah. That makes me think of William Wordsworth. He said poetry is emotion recollected in tranquility. So you have to go out and experience it. And then the poetry comes when you recollect on the experience of inspiration that you had.
So influence is actually one of the great leaps that creative people can make is they make influence active. You're actively seeking influence. You're actively seeking inspiration.
Yeah.
So it's not a passive thing. You're not just like waiting for the call. You're showing up at the studio, and it's
Right.
like there were these nuns once. I forget which nun it was. I was reading this article about nuns one time, and they said, we don't pray because we feel like praying. We pray because the bell rings.
Yeah.
We
Mm.
pray because the bell rings. And I always felt like, the spiritual devotion of having an art practice is, we don't paint because we feel like it. We paint because it's time to paint, and
That's
whatever
beautiful.
inspiration there is going to find us working.
I love the idea of time as a gift, which I think is one of the things I heard you saying,
Yeah.
as opposed to time as money, which is something
Yes.
else I sometimes hear. And
Yeah.
that takes me back to Lewis Hyde and this idea of viewing what we do as a gift both to ourselves and to others. And most of our listeners probably have not heard The Gift. So I'm curious if you could just like summarize for you what does that work mean to you? And then maybe we can hear a little clip of it.
Well, The Gift's a weird book. I mean, it's hugely influential on people. It's one of those books when
Uh-oh.
people read them, it like really gets you if you can get through
Yeah.
it. The Gift was a very important thing to read as a young artist for me because it simply makes the case that there is the market economy and there is the gift economy. You can make art without the economics, but you can't make art without the gift. If you think of the gift economy and the market economy as two circles, and then in the middle is this little sliver of Venn diagram, that's where a lot of really great art exists. But it's very tricky once those worlds are great alone, but when you get them together, things get very tricky.
Yeah.
And every
Yeah.
creative person knows this. There's a great show about this right now called The Studio. That
Mm.
is Seth Rogen's show about being a Hollywood producer.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that Seth Rogen says is that on the outside, you're looking at Hollywood and you're thinking, how do all these crappy movies get made? When you work inside Hollywood, you're amazed that any good movie gets made because
Yes,
it's
I have
Mm.
a
heard that too.
it's a system in which commerce rules the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have found an audio clip from Lady Lodge where somebody is also talking about The Gift. And this is Makoto Fujimura. He is a Japanese American painter, and he works in Nihonga, which is a Japanese style of painting that he
Mm.
says is slow art. And it's basically made where they crush minerals, they crush natural
Oh, yeah.
things and use it as the color. And so
Okay.
if the color gold is on the painting, then it is gold, like actual gold, crushed oyster shell, crushed mica, things like that. It's the only painting I've ever seen that absolutely is not captured unless you're looking at it in person. It's sort of hard to describe, and it's very, very beautiful. And we had the opportunity of bringing him to Laity Lodge in 2009. Laity Lodge is the adult retreat center sponsored by the H.E. Butt Foundation. And he was talking to artists and writers about how he understands the value of art. So here is Makoto Fujimura.
And I was thinking about this, what good is this? How does a capitalistic market system look at what I do and put value on it? And I was reading this book called The Gift by a guy named Lewis Hyde. He's a poet. One, I agree with Hyde here that the work of art is a gift. Second, that it needs to be received as a gift. And that in itself is a gift. That transaction that takes place is not commoditized, commercialized, celebrity-driven thing that what we have now come to call contemporary art. There is something intrinsic about the art process that is needed to sustain you and I creating work. Apart from the marketplace, the work of art can exist on its own without the marketplace. But civilization cannot. Without the gift of art, we lose our soul.
Another way to think about, what he's talking about is process versus product.
Yes.
Mm.
When we think about art, I mean, a lot of people think about art as the finished work. It's the thing up on the wall, and that is the product. But then there's the process of art. There's everything that goes into the artist's life. There's the walk they take in the morning. There's the preparation of
Mm.
the materials. There's the inspiration. There is the actual work that is done over time to make the thing. And I think that people who really love and understand art know that they can feel that process. Whether you really, you can feel what has gone into a real work of art. And I think we're in a moment right now where a lot of people only understand the product of art.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the chit chat about AI right now, these are people
You're reading our minds.
these are
Austin.
these are people who really believe in the product of art and they don't understand the process of art.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
entire world right now is run by people who don't know anything about art. Pretty much every tech person has no idea what is really I don't think there's an art lover in the batch, really. They certainly don't.
Mm.
They're certainly not interested in it in terms of, well, we won't necessarily go there, but I think that's what people really miss the point with AI work, is that there's no gift there. There's no struggle. There's no limitations. It's just it's all about product. Give me this thing.
Yeah.
It's prompting, and I think that people can tell that. So the artist is dealing with a bunch of things. I think a lot of artists right now are really upset. They think that they're struggling with the technology problem.
Sure.
A lot of what we're dealing with is an audience problem. You
Mm.
simply don't have the audience who's ready to receive.
Oh,
If the
that's
audience
good.
hears poems from ChatGPT and thinks they're good, that's
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
you
they
have
don't know
you
how
have
to
There's
an
a
recognize
sort
audience
of
good
that,
poetry.
valuation issue with audience, right? That they don't know what.
and I'm not trying to be snobby. I'm just
No.
saying you have a disappearing writers, for example. There are, who reads anymore? The problem isn't
Yeah.
that there's nothing to say necessarily. The problem, or that ChatGPT is going to replace us or anything. The problem is, where is the audience? Where
Yeah.
is the audience that is hungry for the human,
Yeah.
for this kind of work? And so I think part of the artist never wants to think about the audience. They always want to think about their work and their process and this and that. But part of the great work of, making things in this world is finding people to receive them and finding the right people to receive it.
Austin, you're reading our minds because we were very, very excited to hear what your thoughts are about AI and creativity. But I'm loving what you're also saying about product versus process. And I'm actually thinking about the connection between these things. When you spoke about the importance of process and sort of art as doing, not just as product, it made me think of even the art that we have where I am in our San Antonio office, our Sunset office. We have many beautiful paintings, but we have a beautiful painting from an artist. We'll link her in our show notes. But she did a beautiful painting for us of a pink concha, which for those that aren't familiar is a Mexican pastry dessert, essentially.
Delicious.
They're very delicious, yes. And she does these very realistic paintings of things like conchas and other things that really represent her culture, that also represent culture in San Antonio. And the piece is stunning. But what was even perhaps more stunning was her discussing her process. And so she spoke about going and buying real conchas from panaderias and looking at each one and deciding what color pink this concha that she was painting was going to include. And then the process of creating the pinks that were going to be
Yeah.
included in the concha that she was going to paint. And it was just mind blowing to hear about the process. And I think what's important here is that you don't get that with AI. That's
Yeah.
not going to happen with
No.
AI. Can you just talk about kind of this intersection of product versus process and problems with AI?
Well, I wrote a whole book about it. This is what my book,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
what my book Show Your Work is about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because one of
yeah.
the things that I realized right away is that that book, actually, now that we're talking about it,
Yeah.
comes directly out of the tension that Lewis Hyde talks about in The Gift,
Mm.
is that you have this gift, this process, this thing that you love to do, and you're trying to make it exist, and you're trying to thrive in this market driven world. Um, in the old days, when communication was different and the gatekeeping was different and the world was
Mm,
different, you weren't supposed to ever show anyone your process.
mm,
That's how the sausage is made, so to
yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really grew up admiring people like, I don't know, my mom used to be a home ec teacher. So I was always really interested in people like Martha Stewart or Bob Ross. These people who sort of like gave away their secrets and kind of
Yeah.
demystified the process. And so I was kind of always inspired by that. But I also noticed as a young artist that people were able to build an audience for their work, not just through their own work, but the way they talked about their work.
Yes.
And so many of the things that artists are told, like, you never show people how the sausage is made, the work should speak for itself.
Mm-hmm.
Someone always speaks for the work. That's how art kind of works,
Yeah.
actually. That's how
Yeah.
that world works. And so, what I was trying to figure out with that book is people would come to me and most artists hate self promotion, they hate marketing.
Yeah.
After Steal Like an Artist came out, people would come up to me and they'd say, "How did you do this? How did you go from being unknown and not even really having work of your own that was that, to where you are now?" And I was like, "Can I write a book about that?" And that's
Mm,
what Show Your Work was about, because what I saw was that all artists really care about is their process. What if there was a way that they could share their process while they were working that could build
yeah.
an audience for what they do? And when they had something ready for that audience would kind of be primed for it. They would be ready to receive it.
Yeah, this is what you do, right? I mean, this is in
This is
some
what
ways, it
I
feels
do.
like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is your brand,
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah. I practice what I preach here. Like,
Yes.
yeah, it comes right out of my experience.
right. And the way you
Yeah.
preach it makes it sound easy. I have tried this.
Yeah.
It's been many years because I essentially retreated.
Yeah.
I wasn't producing the kinds of content you are, so I don't want
Right.
to be delusional or anything. But I had a blog. I had various different ways to kind of grow my audience, and was on track to do that. And I found that as a person, I was changing,
Uh-huh.
Mm,
and that I lost the ability to decide how I could be vulnerable.
Mm.
And I actually did not want to be vulnerable about kind of the ways in which I was beginning to think about the world, and felt honestly unsafe to share
mm.
some of those things with the audience that I had built. So how do you be transparent about your process and be vulnerable essentially about who you are as an artist without, opening yourself up to harm? Or maybe you just do, and you're some kind of super courageous person that I am not.
No, I'm not courageous. I'm cowardly.
Oh,
That's very important to
no.
know
Oh,
about
no.
me. I am very cautious and cowardly. So I hear what you're saying. The one thing that I think the mistake of Show Your Work is this idea that was all about authenticity and all
Mm.
about transparency and putting a webcam up in your studio and being vulnerable 24/7. I actually thought of it more as, I have a real marketing part of me. I'm driven by opposites. I find
Uh-huh.
that the
The
tension,
twins.
I think that tension in the creative life, we're in a culture right now that's like, ooh, tension bad. Like, oh man, I don't want to be tense. Like, oh, you got to like loosen up. But I find that tension is this very important thing for creative work. Is that, and the way I describe it to people is like a guitar string.
Mm.
A guitar string is slung between two opposites, two poles. And if you don't ratchet up the tension on a guitar string, if you loosen the tension totally, it just buzzes and there's no music, it just makes noise. If you ratchet it too tight, it snaps. And so it is with our spirit. Our spirit needs just the right tension.
Mm.
There needs to be just the right tension and work to create energy, and you need to be able to like tap into that tension for the music to happen. But for me, that tension is that marketing, wanting the work out in the world, but wanting to do really good work and be the artist in the market, right?
Yeah.
But to go back to your initial question, my thing is that you control what you share. You are in
Yes.
Mm.
control of what you share. When you stick a webcam up in your studio, that will shut you down
Yeah.
because you're being observed. So my feeling was always the tension is to try to proceed as if you're not going to share things and then to
Mm.
later pick up these little bits and pieces and say, oh, here are
Yeah.
things that I can
Yeah.
share, right? And I do think that in some ways it's worthwhile to, like, you'll notice that like I don't actually share stuff while I'm working on a book. I'm too in the headspace of
Yeah.
it's too raw, I'm too vulnerable. I can't share things, from a
Yeah.
book. But what I can do is do like a piece about like, here's what's helping me write this week, and talk about, I don't know, writing books or something. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like
Yeah.
there's always, and one of the ways that I tell people, so my great hustle is is that I have this newsletter that I do every week on Friday that people that in some ways is kind of what I'm known for. I'm known for the
Yeah.
Yeah.
books, and then the newsletter is kind of the thing that people really interact with and has
Yeah.
a really big audience.
This is the
Um,
freebie newsletter on Substack.
the freebie newsletter that's been going on way before Substack and will be going on way
Fair.
after
Okay.
Substack,
Yeah.
just so I
Yeah.
can say that out loud, because
Good. Good.
I like Substack as a platform right now, but I don't trust it. And they know that, and I've told them that,
Yeah. Yeah.
but to me, the newsletter is something that I've been doing for about a dozen years now. And it's a list of 10 things I think are worth sharing every Friday.
Yeah.
And the great thing that I do in that newsletter is every week I give you this stuff that I think is really interesting. And then when I have something to sell to you, it goes right up at the top of the list.
Yeah.
So every week I'm building a relationship with this audience. I'm giving them great things. I'm trying to be as generous as I can. I'm trying to point out as much as I can. I'm trying to like give people as much good stuff. And then the minute I have something to sell them, that's the good stuff. Here's what I made for you. You can buy it here. So that is my great work of like showing my work, is that every
Yeah.
Friday you get this kind of peek at what's making me excited and what's
Yeah.
going into my work. And that's part of the process. And I'm showing you that stuff while I'm busy cooking up whatever I got going, on my own stuff. And then when it's time to blow out my own stuff, you're going to hear about it because I've got your email. And so that's the dance between, that's the dance between the gift and the that's the gift. And that and the layers of the newsletter have changed now because we have a paid tier now. I say
Yeah.
we as if it's someone other than me and Meg, my wife, doing this thing. But the idea with the paid tier was, okay, you want to get a little bit closer to the process. You
Yeah.
want to hear from me twice a week. You want to get writing that might end up in a book someday, but you want to get it right
Mm.
now when it's raw and new. Okay, well, you pay $50 a year and you get that connection and you're able
Yeah.
to talk back at me in the comments and stuff. So,
Yeah.
it's kind of that, Marcus, I really hear what you're saying, because it is, in some ways I'm selling access to me. I mean,
Yeah.
there is a
Yeah.
sense that the Tuesday tier, and by the way, I am blessed with I have the kindest, nicest audience. This has always been true. The comment section of the paid newsletter is like standing in line at one of my book signings. It's just the nicest
Mm.
people. I don't know what, the one thing I'll say about the work is a lot of jerks don't show up. Jerks just don't show up.
Yeah.
And so, but I do think that these days, if you have a kind of walled garden, everybody, because people are like, well, why don't you let us comment if we're not paying people? And I'm like, well, one of the things that happens when you pay into something and you buy into it is that you really want to keep it nice. You
Well,
have
you have a
some
sense of
ownership
ownership.
over it.
Yeah.
Right. And so the
Yes.
comments section in our Tuesday newsletter, and even in the Friday, because only paid people are able to comment on the Friday newsletter. So sometimes the Friday newsletter is just as interesting. But again, this is why our world is so strange. The market, if we think about that gift economy and the market economy, putting up a market paywall saying, no, you got to pay to get in here, it actually creates a space in which gift things can enter.
That's right.
I really resist product in my work, maybe because I have product in my day-to-day work. And
Yeah.
so my creative work, I try to keep pure sounds like a judgment on the work I do
Yeah.
to get paid, which I'm very grateful for the HUBET Foundation. I love working here.
Yeah.
But when I write poetry or when I do plays, I have no more favorite art form than live theater, which is you can't replace live theater with AI. I don't think that that's actually possible.
No.
But with poetry, when I pulled back from a very early and clumsy attempt to build a brand, I decided to just write poetry for friends
Mhm.
or myself and never share and never submit. And it's been 10 years since I started doing that. And I'm beginning to wonder at some point, do I come out of that? But it's very freeing.
Well, you're in great company. I mean, Emily Dickinson.
Well, yeah, I don't want to be delusional, but
I mean,
yeah, she's great.
But
Pretty
the
awesome.
thing I love about Emily Dickinson though is like she's writing poems on the back of envelopes that people have
Yeah.
sent her. And she's including poems in like letters she's sending. There's talk about the gift. I mean, like one of the things I read about and keep going is that if you're feeling burnt out, one of the things I hate about this culture is that the minute you show any proficiency for anything, well, oh, this fried chicken. Oh, you can fry chicken. You know what? What comes next? You could have a food
You
trailer.
could have it. Yeah. You should
It's the
sell this.
first thing we say.
Uh-huh.
It's the major compliment
You
we
should
give is we
cater.
talk about you should take that
Mm.
thing that you love to do that I'm loving
Mhm.
right now. You should ruin it by making it your job. That's
Yeah.
exactly what you should
Yeah.
do, right? And
You
so
could make money.
one of the
Yes,
first
stay
things,
an amateur.
yeah. I mean, one of the first things I tell people is like, if you have turned your hobby into your job, which a lot of the people that I've talked to have, guess what? You got to get a new hobby. And a lot of artists,
Mhm.
that whatever they're doing that they were loving, and when you turn it into your job, you need something else that's outside of
Yeah.
the market. You need something that's pure gift.
A lot of what you're saying, it really sounds like there's a lot of freedom and just kind of letting go in your art, just
Mhm.
allowing yourself not to have to put so many expectations on where is this going? What am I going to do with this? Can I make money off of this? Am I going to eat off of this? And of course, as you've discussed, it doesn't always feel like that's something that's easy to do for a number of reasons. But there's a beauty in the sort of letting go of those expectations and of those kind of multi-layered need from the art.
Yeah, I mean, I think that art, a hero of mine is Brian Eno, and one of the tensions that he talks about culturally is this idea of control and surrender.
Hmm.
An artist is someone who has control and surrender in a unique tension because you're sort of in control and you're sort of not. Like you're giving yourself over to an experience, and surrender is a big part of it. Again, it's a matter of spirit, not of technique necessarily. And the other thing that I wrote about this week is if you don't show up for yourself and your own creative work, you can't show up for the world. So a lot of the
That's right.
creative people I know, there's a lady I know named Beth Pickens who's a art coach, and she said this thing that just like drilled right to my core. She said artists and creative people are people, artists in particular. She talked because her whole thing is artists. Um, Artists are people who are driven to make creative work, and when they don't make it, their quality of life suffers. They suffer.
Mm,
And so it's a lot of what I do right now is just trying to be the thing I want to see last. And so when you're kind of like in the currents of the moment, like with the AI stuff, I'm trying to keep an open mind about it. I'm
Uh-huh.
trying to, just okay, well, we'll see what happens. But there's also a
yeah.
deep part of me that believes so much in the struggle of the brain wants to do something, but the hand wants to do something else. And the
Mm,
hand turns out to be smarter than the brain. And the hand tells the brain something that the brain didn't know about itself. And it's this two-way street of, idea and execution and brain and hand and spirit and body,
Yes.
yeah.
and I know that that's where the magic of the stuff comes out. And I just feel really bad for a generation that might not experience that. But then I think to myself, as long as you do it and you celebrate it, you're helping it continue.
That's right.
The next generation is still going to have bodies,
Yeah.
right? They're
You're still going
still
to be
going to
in a
have
meat sack.
hands.
You're still going to
That's
be,
right.
it's going to
That's
fall
right.
apart on you, and it's going to, you're going to have to wrestle with it. I've become very interested in, I mean, there's a whole different subject, but I collect stories of people whose physical shortcomings or differences led to some signature work. So I'm the parent of two people who stutter. And there are a
Ah,
lot of people who stutter turn into writers because they want to write the way they wish they could talk. But there's even more interesting things like that than Art Spiegelman, the cartoonist, has amblyopia, I think is how you say it, but he has one functioning eye.
Oh,
When you have
wow.
one functioning eye, it flattens the world. You don't have depth perception. Well,
Mm,
in a certain if you're playing baseball, you're not gonna hit much. Like,
yeah.
you're not gonna catch many balls when you don't have depth perception. But if you want to be a cartoonist, it's like a superpower because the world's
hmm.
flattened for
Wow.
you, right? Tommy
Hmm.
Iommi, the guitar player for Black Sabbath, lost two fingertips in an industrial accident. He fitted his fingers with these leather caps and he detuned his guitar so that he could, move the strings better. Well, Black Sabbath, a lot of the sound of that metal band comes from those detuned sludgy
Mm,
guitars. So,
hmm.
Regina Spektor, songwriter, wanted to be a
Oh,
classical
yeah.
pianist. They said, Your hands are too small. You're never going to be
Yeah.
a classical pianist." Okay, well, I'll write pop songs then, or, I'll be a songwriter.
Yeah.
So the things that make us different in the right context, are superpowers. Saul Steinberg said the thing that we respond to in any work of art is the struggle of the artist against his or her limitations.
I love that.
Wow.
I love that. It gives me hope because creativity is finding a way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's going to come through.
yep.
Austin,
Austin.
this has been amazing.
Yes.
Thank you
Oh,
so
good.
much.
I had
Yeah.
fun.
We did
It was
We
too.
so
did
nice to
too.
talk to
Yeah.
y'all.
Yes.
We
So
did
much of
too.
what you
Thank
do
you.
is encourage artists. And so thank you for all of the encouragement today. I am inspired, truly. So,
Oh, I'm
Yes,
glad.
yes. Thank you
I'm
yeah.
so
glad.
much. The Echoes podcast is written and produced by Camille Hall Ortega, Rob Stennett, and me, Marcus Goodyear. It's edited by Rob Stennett and Kim Stone. Our executive producers are Patton Dodd and David Rogers. Special thanks to our guest today, Austin Kleon. I don't know if he subscribes to Echoes Magazine or not, but he should. And you can too, because it's free. Go to echoesmagazine.org to subscribe. You'll receive a beautiful print magazine each quarter, and did we mention that it's free? You can find a link in our show notes. The Echoes podcast and Echoes Magazine are both productions brought to you by the H.E. Butt Foundation. Learn more about our vision and mission at hebfdn.org.